Adrials Ride. Written by Steve Buchholz. Read by Forrest McIlvray. Adrials Ride. Atop the mountain Adrials, the noble forester, Adrial, resides. With a heart of refined gold and hands of tempered bronze, he tirelessly works, crafting mead to make the heart merry and chops wood to make the hearth warm. This isn't for his own stores, nor for financial gain. This toil is born from the love of the residents of Kemp. From the sun's kiss in spring to the bitter bite of winter's cold, he labors to travel to Dutchery on the longest day of the year to deliver his annual offering of ale and pine wood to the townsfolk. After his long journey, he sits in his cabin and listens to the sound of laughter and joy as it passes over the snow and into his heart, giving him great joy, warmth, and purpose. He loved all and was loved by all, but one. For the frost imp, devoid of any happiness, paced back and forth in agony, the sounds of happiness and comfort assaulting his ears throughout the holiday season, its joy heating his soul of cold misery. In his dismay, the frost imp plotted a scheme to prevent another season of joy. He arched his back, grasped onto the snow drifting in the wind, and rode its icy tide to the north country, where he crafted an arrow from the permafrost. With bombs of doubt and disbelief, he enchanted its tips and anointed its feathers. Once forged, the frost imp waited patiently for the night before Adrial's ride on the longest night of the year. He crawled like a snake onto the peak of the roof of the forester's cabin. Quietly crouching, he waited for the forester to emerge from his cabin and mount his ready packed sleigh. As the forester exited the warmth of his home, the imp drew the arrow up into the air. The north wind blustered, forcing the arrow deep into the forester's heart, instantly coating its golden surface in clay and ice. The forester, bewildered at the pain in his chest, stumbled to a stone overlooking the Dutchery and sat in silence, overcome by doubt and disbelief. The night grew older and his heart grew colder. The forester sat on the stone and tried to make sense of the world, frozen by the doubt and disbelief in his heart. His silence was finally broken by the crunching sound of footsteps in the snow. They began soft and distant at first, then became louder and louder until they abruptly stopped behind him. "Good day, my forester. Why is it quiet in Kemp?" The sweet sound of a woman's voice, familiar and beautiful, danced in his ears, and his spirit bound to life in its icy shell, for it was his dearly loved fire mage. Although paralysis still gripped him, her voice freed his tongue, and he pressed out. "I'm not sure. I have not gone. I fear that this season is pointless, and my gifts are inadequate." Concerned, the mage sat behind him on the rock and gripped his cold hand. Seeing the frost imp's magic at play, she paused and crafted careful words. "You are part of one big universe, and your annual trek pays homage to a larger cosmic need for joy. For acts of joy consumes cold's bite and strengthen the soul. The season is warmer with this joy. Please, allow me to show you the joys of the season. If you can deny the beauty and purpose, I will sit with you here until the cold of the season extinguishes joy's flame forever. However, if I persuade you of the purpose of your gifts of love, you must let me ride with you and share in the season of happiness and the warmth with it brings." The forester, still crippled by the cold, cast his icy blue gaze into her warm green eyes. The peace and beauty within struck his soul, locked in its icy cage. The gambit was true born of love, and love is a flame that cannot be frozen, even in his heart still debilitated by frost and clay. I should say that task is almost impossible, but I accept your deal. The forester reasoned. The mage placed her hand inside the pouch attached to her waist and removed a tiny red stone. She then placed the stone onto her lap, and with a roll of her hand, she projected a portal in front of herself and the forester. Visible in the spectre was a large elderly man seated in a chair with a list of names, some naughty, some nice, only pausing to sip on a cup of milk and bound a jolly, deep laugh. He masterfully went about his task of scribbling away on the list. Calmly, the mage explained the apparition. Behold, what you see is the father of the season. He watches over the children and rewards them for their good deeds. Once a year he travels, not unlike you, to each home giving good tidings of joy. Sitting in awe of the father of the season, she lost herself in the spirit of the holiday, her heart swelling with happiness as her gaze fixed on the shape of the portsome man. This sight was serene, warm, and gruffly interrupted by a scoff and a sigh from the forester, who uncomfortably sat on the stone with his arms crossed in front of him. Shameful example! That plumpsome elf watches all the kinder in the world, and arbitrarily decides who's been naughty and who's been nice? Isn't that mildly rude to presume who's good and bad? His actions are nothing more than judgment and manipulation by means of greed, he said. The mage paused, her face flushing with anger at the scornful forester, who is now throwing pieces of ice at the visage of the father. Her anger subsided as quickly as it rose up, as she remembered that this wasn't her beloved forester, but the ice and clay in his heart. That was only a warm-up. I have more to show you. She chirped happily, then continued to instruct the forester by pointing to a star in the sky. Look way up there at the star, she said. The forester looked up and blurted out, There are so many stars in the sky. You must be more specific than that. Carefully, the fire mage plucked a red hair from her head and circled it in the air, faster and faster, until the hair burst into flame and fluttered in front of the forester's view, circling a star in the sky. Once the flame circled the star 3 times, it vanished into the cold night air. That star is very, very special. It may not seem like it, but many years ago, that star burned bright in the sky as the cosmos welcomed a child into the world, and that child brought peace and hope to many, many people, she explained. Again, the forester huffed and scorned the mage, saying, I remember that fable. The young child grew and gave much hope to many people indeed. However, within a few years after his passing, evil people with hearts of greed perverted his legacy and enslaved a great number of innocent victims. If our purpose for the season is in remembrance of that event, I'm content with the flame burning out. This time, the mage's response did not find the heated flare of anger, but caught a chill, and she knew that as the night progressed, the flame of the season was burning out. The mage looked at the forester, who was turning a pale hue and shaking from the cold. Mind if I make a little fire? The mage asked happily. Suit yourself, the forester apathetically replied. The fire mage rubbed her hands together rapidly in a spherical motion, the cold night air fleeing from an abundance of heat generated by the motion. Faster and faster her hands moved until, with a whoosh, flames shot from her hand and sat upon the surface of the snow in front of the forester. Dear mage, your craft is the most beautiful, most powerful in the land, but I still fear that the cause is lost. The season is a sham, and I am a fool for feeling elsewise. The forester whimpered as he watched the fire's arms dance on the snow. The mage looked deep into the flame. Her eyes narrowed. She took her left hand and swept it across the yellow flame, and she replied, "Let me show you what you actually do for the fine folk of this season." The flame then exploded outward and made a shell around the two of them, the flame curling into shapes of the townfolk, singing and sharing the love of the community, drinking the mead as they dispensed the wood. Children exchanged small gifts with each other as mothers watched with love and pride. "See, your gifting of ale makes the heart merry and binds the townfolk with a loving bond, only shared among community," she explained. With a fluid movement, the color of the flame turned to a deep orange, as the shapes turned into a man and a woman sitting on a wool blanket in front of a fire in a loving embrace. "Forester, your wood makes fire. That fire brings love and peace. Your gifts, which you bestow the townsfolk with, are much more than you think. You bring life to the Dutchery when the entire world about it is dead." The flame then died out, returning the cold night air. The forester sat motionless, his eyes cast downward. The mage, believing herself to finally be successful in breaking the curse, moved in closer to her beloved forester and realized that he was turning blue from the frost inside. Her fire failed to heat him. She sat in close and began to mourn the season. She knew that with the frost imp's scheme successful, the town would perish under harsh conditions. The weather would turn most foul, and the town would freeze. Joy and libations lost forever. The holiday would cease to exist, and the hearts of the people would be coated with a sadness as thick as the blanket of snow on the mountain's peak. Even the sun's first kiss of spring would not return such a place. It then struck her, the worst woe in this night. Her beloved forester would die. His spirit would freeze solid. His bronze hands would turn to dust, and his heart of gold would be forever trapped in clay. He would be lost to the season of snow and ice. She wrapped her trembling arms around his frozen body and tenderly held him close, his cold breath slowing down as his icy blue eyes frosted over to a foggy white hue. In great sadness, she watched as the flame that was his life became extinguished forever. She then leaned into his shoulder. "On your journey to the hereafter, know that I always loved you, and always will." She kissed his neck, her tears freezing as they fell from her eyes and on to the still chest of the frozen forester. As soon as her lips touched his neck and his heart felt her love, the clay fractured and the ice melted away. Love's eternal flame burned bright in the forester once again, and disbelief was gone. His soul entered his body, heat rebirthing his life. Looking down through the thaw in his eyes, he saw the mage resting her head on his chest. "Love!" he exclaimed, and the mage, in terror, threw herself off the rock. "Love! Love is the purpose and reason for the holiday. If we keep love alive, no frost can defeat it. No spell can contain it. No evil can bewitch it. It is not for the purpose of gifts nor for its false manufactured happiness, but for the pure love born from eternal communal fire." The mage, hearing her beloved forester's voice again, was overcome with joy and leaped into his arms. Promptly, he slipped on the fragments of ice and clay that once held him prisoner, and they both fell into the snow. She showered him with kisses and held her tight. The waves of love's pure heart radiated off the two, so strong that the snow in their midst melted away, and small flowers grew in a halo around them. Love's eternal fire burned stronger and stronger, causing the flowers to change into brilliant colors of green, red, and orange. The earth couldn't hold back the overwhelming love on its surface anymore. Radiant colors burst from the ground and painted the sky with the magnificent colors. Those colors waved back and forth, dancing across the icy blue sky, and illuminated the snow in beautiful light. "We must go. The fair Dutchery must feel the joy that resides in the love of one to another," he exclaimed. Both got to their feet and ran for the sleigh, still loaded and ready for delivery. On the way, the mage saw the frost imp standing on the roof of the forester's cabin. He gazed at the magnificent colors strewn across the night sky in disgust. With a putrid growl, he gripped the north winds and flew away, never to return. On that night, the two traveled throughout the land, delivering mead and wood to the townsfolk. The extravagant colors of joy and love filling the night sky and illuminating their path. After the last bundle of wood was delivered and the final tankard of ale was poured, the couple returned to the cabin to sit in front of the fireplace, their embrace causing love's eternal flame to burn so bright and warm that it was visible in the night sky as radiant colors seen dancing among the stars until shattered by dawn. Henceforth, on the cold nights of the season, when the heart grows cold with doubt and disbelief, the eternal flame of love illuminates the night sky from aside a rock in front of a cabin. Inside that cabin, a mage and a forester hold each other closely and plan for the longest night of the year when they both join in Adrials' ride.